my name is Alan Binder. I'm a lunar and planetary scientist, a spacecraft systems and design engineer, and a mission director. I've worked in the space program essentially since its beginning, and I have a lot of concerns about what has happened since the end of Apollo and the fact that the United States is not capitalizing on the experience that we had during the earlier days and leading us nowhere. My background, as I would like to go through, I have a background in astronomy. I was an amateur astronomer when I was a teenager. I wanted to be an astronomer. This was in the 1950s, before the space age got going. I have a bachelor's in mathematics and physics, and I have a PhD in planetary science, geology, astronomy, and geophysics. I taught and worked in various German universities for 10 years, and while in Germany I did a Habilitation, which is becoming qualified to be a professor in the German university system. I have been involved, as I said, with the space program since its earliest days. I lived very close to Yerkes Observatory, which is a very famous old observatory, and I was fortunate enough to work there during the summers when I was an undergraduate student, and that was in the 1957, 58, 59 period when the space program was just beginning. I did my graduate studies at the University of Arizona here in Tucson, Arizona, and worked for Dr. Gerard P. Kuiper during all those years, a very famous astronomer and planetary scientist. I became a principal investigator on the Viking Mars landing missions shortly after I got my PhD in 1967. I was a principal investigator of the lander camera team, and as you may know, the two Viking landers made the first successful unmanned landings on Mars in 1976. I worked then, as I said, in Germany for 10 years, and when I came back to the United States, I worked for Lockheed at the Johnson Space Center doing advanced mission planning studies for lunar bases and manned Mars missions. During that time, a group of us got together, and because NASA had abandoned the moon after Apollo, and decided to do a mission of our own, since NASA missions had gotten extremely costly. Most planetary mission cost $1 billion, and were taking maybe 10 years to come to fruition. We felt there was a need to demonstrate that you could do missions in a short time for a small amount of money and still get good science. So we initiated the program which we call Lunar Prospector, and after 6 years of trying to find philanthropic support for our mission, the NASA started a program called Discovery, in which scientists could propose their own missions and get the money from NASA to do the mission. I was a Lockheed employee at that time and asked Lockheed out in Sunnyvale, California to get behind my proposal. They did. My mission was selected as the first competitively selected, peer-reviewed in the Discovery series of missions. The mission cost just $63 million. We built the spacecraft in 22 months, and we produced data which was several times better than I had promised NASA in the proposal. One of the purposes of the Discovery program, besides giving scientists a chance to do their own missions, was to prove that you could do things faster, better, cheaper. I did that with Lunar Prospector, and I was the only person to successfully do an extremely inexpensive mission in a relatively short time. NASA's own attempts to do such missions had led to 3 costly failures, actually more than that, because I'm only speaking of lunar and planetary missions. One of the problems with NASA is a huge bureaucracy, and most people know that the government is the worst form of business. Had NASA done my mission, it would not have cost $63 million. It would have cost roughly 10 times that. And this is one of the concerns that I have, that the United States has been going nowhere since the end of Apollo. Now, I will be discussing each of these various topics: the moon, its resources, its benefit to humanity, the troubles with the space program, in a series of short talks like the one I'm doing today. In addition to my activities as a lunar and planetary scientist, I am the director of the Lunar Research Institute and the CEO of Lunar Exploration, Inc. The first institute is a nonprofit science-oriented organization. The second one is an engineering-oriented for-profit organization, the purpose of which is to build spacecraft on a commercial basis and explore the moon. Again, I will talk about the need to commercialize lunar exploration and beyond, actually, in the next few talks. When I finished with the Lunar Prospector mission, which was historical in a number of ways, not only was it very successful or inexpensive, but it was the first time that a scientist had led a mission from its inception to its absolute conclusion. I was responsible for each and every one of the phases: the definition of the mission, the design of the spacecraft, the construction, testing, and preparation of the spacecraft for launch, and then finally, when it was launched, I was mission director. This has never happened before in the history of the American space program, or probably any other space program. Not only was I the first and only scientist to do this, no one has ever had that much responsibility for any mission. No bureaucrat in NASA have had the authority over an entire mission the way I had. In any case, I wrote a history of the Lunar Prospector mission for the American public so that they could see what could be done and how badly NASA and the big aerospace companies run the American space program, why so much money and time is wasted. The book is called Lunar Prospector Against All Odds. It's 1,100 pages, and it's written in the form of a diary, and it will give you the opportunity to live a mission and see how much fun it is. It will also show you how difficult it is to work with NASA, with the big aerospace companies, and why we need to commercialize the exploration of the moon and planets. I wrote a second book called Moonquake, which is a science fiction story, science fiction if you will, but it's based on factual engineering and factual lunar science. And it's a story, again, showing how badly NASA runs things and why, for example, we had the Columbia and Challenger disasters, because NASA simply ignores the warnings that are given to it by the engineers. I hope you will not only view this video, but the following ones on the moon and all these other topics I would like to discuss. And I hope you will consider getting copies of Moonquake and Lunar Prospector Against All Odds, since this will give you a great insight on the problems with the American space program and how we can do a lot better with it. So I will close for now, and I hope you will view the other videos, and I hope you will become interested in trying to support the commercialization of lunar exploration. Thank you very much.